A frozen plea cuts through the blizzard's howl. A woman, barely standing, begs for scraps and shelter. In the harsh winter of 1881, Tsalagi, a stoic Comanche warrior, guards his heart and his daughter, Clara, against a world that stole his wife. Yet, Clara's tender cry of "Mama" for this stranger, Ilara, cracks his defenses. What secrets hide behind her scars? And can a child's faith forge a family from frost and pain? A tale of trust and truth awaits, where love rises from betrayal's ashes. Subscribe now, share where you're listening from, and uncover why Ilara's past could change everything. Will you follow their journey to its heart-wrenching end? Snow lashed the Sangre de Cristo mountains like a whip, the wind screaming through pines bent double under winter's weight. It was 1881, and the high country was no place for mercy. Tsalagi, a Comanche warrior turned rancher, braced against the gale, his calloused hands wrestling the barn door shut. His breath steamed in the dusk, his dark eyes scanning the horizon for threats, coyotes, bandits, or worse. The world had taken his wife in a bloody robbery years back, leaving him and his 8-year-old daughter, Clara, to carve a life from this unforgiving land. He trusted no one, not since the frontier showed its teeth. A shadow moved near the frozen creek, a stumble in the snow. Tsalagi froze, one hand dropping to the knife at his belt. Not a wolf, not a man. A woman, crumpled like a discarded rag, her cloak shredded by the storm. She lifted her head, lips cracked and blue, dark hair plastered to her wind-burned face. A corner of straw, a crust of bread, she rasped, voice steady despite her trembling frame. "I'll earn it." Her eyes, sharp as flint, held no plea, only defiance against the cold that clawed her bones. Tsalagi's jaw tightened. Strangers brought trouble, and he'd had enough of that. He'd built this ranch with sweat and solitude, raising Clara far from town's whispers and dangers. "No room," he growled, starting to turn. But a small figure darted past him, barefoot in the snow, her nightdress flapping like a ghost. Clara, her braids swinging, stopped short of the woman. "Mama," she whispered, eyes wide as embers, seeing something Tsalagi couldn't. "She ain't your mother," he said, voice low but firm, pulling Clara back. The woman flinched, her gaze flickering to the girl, then away. "I'm called Ilara," she said, barely audible over the wind. "I don't need charity, just shelter." Blood seeped from a gash on her hand, staining the snow. Tsalagi's instincts screamed to shut the door, to keep the world out. But Clara's hand gripped his, warm and stubborn, her face set like she'd fight the storm itself for this stranger. He studied Ilara. Her posture, unbent despite the frost, spoke of survival, not surrender. She wasn't begging, just bartering for a chance to live. His wife's death had taught him to trust only what he could hold: his daughter, his land, his rifle. Yet something in Ilara's steady gaze, like a horse refusing to break, stirred a memory of his own battles. "Barn's that way," he said finally, nodding toward the dark shape across the yard. "Straw's dry. Stay out of trouble." Ilara nodded. No gratitude, no weakness, just a soldier's acknowledgement. She limped toward the barn, her footprints filling fast with snow. Clara tugged at Tsalagi's sleeve. "She's cold, Papa, like in my dream." He crouched, meeting her eyes, bright as the stars above the pass. "Dreams ain't truth, little one." But her frown held a child's certainty. She didn't say she wasn't Mama. Inside, the cabin's fire crackled, casting shadows on the rough-hewn walls. Tsalagi set Clara by the hearth, her small frame shivering. He added a log, not for warmth, but to push heat toward the barn's thin walls. Ilara was out there now, curled in straw between the horses, A stranger with no past, only a name. He sat in his chair, the wind howling like a wounded beast outside. His hand rested near the rifle, always close since the day his wife's blood soaked the earth. Clara's voice broke the silence. "She's alone, Papa." He didn't answer, his thoughts on Alara's face, not her frailty, but her grit. She'd stood in the blizzard, half frozen, and asked for nothing but a chance. He'd seen men break under less, begging for whiskey or gold. Alara hadn't. Her eyes, locked on Clara, held something deeper than desperation. A spark, like she'd walked through hell and kept her chin up. The fire popped, and Tsalagi's gaze drifted to the barn's faint outline through the frosted window. Clara curled into her blanket, still watching the dark. "Go to sleep," he murmured. She didn't move. "She's safe there, right?" He nodded, though he wasn't sure. Safety was a lie the frontier rarely kept. But as he tucked Clara in, her small hand clutching his, he couldn't shake the word she'd whispered. "Mama." It cut sharper than the wind, and for the first time in years, Tsalagi wondered if the storm had brought more than just a stranger. The storm's howl faded to a low moan by dawn, leaving the Sangre de Cristo Mountains draped in a silence as heavy as the snow. Tsalagi rose early, his boots crunching across the yard to check the barn. Alara was already up, sweeping straw from the dirt floor, her movements deliberate, like a hawk circling before it lands. Her cloak, still damp, hung on a nail, and her hands, red from cold, gripped the broom with purpose. She met his gaze, unflinching, but said nothing. He nodded once, the only acknowledgement between two souls who knew the weight of surviving alone. Inside the cabin, Clara's laughter broke the morning's chill. She trailed Alara like a shadow, chattering about the horses, the stars, the way frost sparkled on the fence posts. Alara worked without pause, chopping firewood, scrubbing pots, mending a torn saddle strap with stitches tight as a warrior's resolve. Her hands moved with a rhythm that spoke of muscle memory, not training, as if the frontier itself had carved her instincts. Tsalagi watched from the porch, his pipe smoke curling into the crisp air. Clara's joy was a blade, sharp and unfamiliar, cutting through the walls he'd built since his wife's blood stained the earth. By noon, Alara had cleared a path from the barn to the well, her breath steaming in the cold. Clara followed, mimicking her steps, tying knots in a scrap of rope Alara had handed her. "Like this, Mama?" Clara asked, her small fingers fumbling but eager. Alara's lips twitched, not quite a smile, but she knelt, adjusting the girl's grip. "Tighter," she said softly, her voice like a low wind over the plains. Tsalagi's hand tightened on his pipe. That word, Mama, grated like sand in a wound. Clara hadn't spoken it since the robbery, since the night he'd carried her from the wreckage of their old life. He turned away, striding to the corral to check the horses. Their breath puffed white, their hooves pawing the frozen ground. But his eyes kept drifting to the barn, where Alara now showed Clara how to stack kindling. The woman's efficiency was unnerving, her silence louder than words. She didn't ask for more than she'd been given, didn't pry into his past. Yet her presence was a stone in his boot, a reminder that trust was a gamble he'd sworn never to take again. That evening, as the sun bled red across the peaks, Tsalagi caught sight of Alara's shoulder while she hauled water from the well. Her sleeve slipped, revealing a scar, jagged, pale, the mark of iron shackles bitten into flesh. His gut twisted. He'd seen such scars on warriors, prisoners, men who'd fought and lost, or betrayed. He stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. She froze, pulling her sleeve down, her eyes meeting his with a glint of defiance. "Old wound," she said, voice flat, daring him to ask more. He didn't. Not yet. The next day, hoofbeats broke the valley's quiet. Tsalagai stepped onto the porch, rifle loose in his hand, as two riders crested the ridge. Ward, a bounty hunter with a face like weathered leather, dismounted. His companion, a hulking man with a crooked nose, lagging behind. Ward tipped his hat, eyes sharp as a vulture's. "Heard you got a woman here, Tsalagi. Came out of nowhere. Might be trouble." He unfolded a crumpled wanted poster, a sketch of a woman, scar on her shoulder, accused of killing a guard. "Seen her?" Tsalagi's gaze flicked to the barn, where Alara was teaching Clara to braid a horse's mane. Clara's laughter rang out, clear as a bell. His jaw worked, memories of betrayal. His wife's killers, never caught, burning in his chest. "No one like that here," he said, voice like gravel. Ward squinted, unconvinced, but turned his horse. "We'll be back," he muttered, spurring away. That night, by the fire's dim glow, Clara refused to sleep unless Alara sat beside her. The woman hummed a low tune, her fingers deftly braiding Clara's hair. Tsalagi watched, his pipe cold now. The scar haunted him, whispering of secrets, of violence. Was she a fugitive, or just another soul the frontier had chewed up? Clara's eyes fluttered shut, her small hand clutching Alara's sleeve. "She's safe, Papa," Clara murmured, half asleep. Tsalagi said nothing, but his hand stayed near the rifle. Alara's gaze met his across the room, unreadable, like a storm gathering on the horizon. The fire crackled, and outside, the wind began to rise again, carrying the weight of questions neither would ask. The wind's restless murmur grew to a roar, as if the Sangre de Cristo mountains themselves were stirring, uneasy under the weight of unspoken truths. Tsalagi sat by the fire. The scar on Alara's shoulder burned into his mind, a riddle wrapped in iron and blood. Clara slept, her breath soft, clutching Alara's braid like a lifeline. Alara's eyes, meeting his in the firelight, held a storm of their own. Secrets waiting to break free. Dawn brought no peace. The sky churned gray, heavy with the promise of snow. Tsalagai saddled his horse, his hand steady but his thoughts jagged. Alara worked in silence, splitting wood with an axe, her strokes as sure as a gunslinger's draw. Clara shadowed her, humming a tune Alara had taught her, oblivious to the tension coiling tighter than a rattler's spring. Tsalagi's gaze lingered on Alara's shoulder, hidden now under a patched shirt. He wanted answers, but the frontier taught patience. Truth came slow, like tracks in deep snow. By midday, Alara knelt by the creek, washing tin plates, her fingers red from the icy water. Clara sat nearby, weaving grass into a lopsided braid. "You ever run from wolves, Mama?" she asked, innocent as the sky was wide. Alara paused, her hands still. "Wolves, men, same thing sometimes," she said, voice low, like a confession to the wind. Tsalagi, checking the fence line, overheard. His hand tightened on the post. She wasn't just running from cold. That night, Alara sat by Clara's bedside, her voice a soft murmur, as she spoke of stars and trails she couldn't fully recall. "I carried words once," she said, almost to herself. "Letters, promises, lives tucked in paper." Clara's eyes shone. Like a hero. Alara's lips pressed thin. Or a fool. Tsalagi, in the doorway, felt the words land like stones. He stepped closer. "What kind of words?" Her gaze met his, unflinching. "The kind men kill for." She stood, brushing past him, her sleeve grazing his arm. "I was a courier in the border wars. Betrayed. Caged. Branded a killer." Her voice cracked, not with fear, but fury. "I don't know if I'm clean, Tsalagi, but I know I saved someone once." Clara stirred, clutching Alara's hand. "You're no killer, Mama. I prayed you'd come." Alara's eyes softened, but Tsalagi saw the weight she carried. Guilt or innocence, it was a heavy load. If this story of broken trust and hidden courage pulls at you, join us. Subscribe and share where you're listening from. Let's walk this trail together, chasing truths that lie beyond the storm. Before dawn, the valley shook with hoofbeats. Ward was back, 3 riders at his heels, their dusters flapping like vultures' wings. Snow fell thick, blurring the world to white. Tsalagi grabbed his rifle, stepping onto the porch as Ward dismounted, a pistol glinting at his hip. "Time's up, Comanche," Ward snarled. "Hand her over. She's wanted for murder." Tsalagi's eyes flicked to the barn, where Alara stood, axe in hand, Clara behind her. "No murderer here," he said, voice cold as the ice underfoot. Ward sneered, drawing his gun. "We'll see." The first shot cracked like thunder, splintering the porch rail. Tsalagi dove, rolling into the snow, his rifle barking in reply. Alara shoved Clara behind a barrel and swung the axe, catching a rider's arm as he lunged. The valley erupted. Gunfire, shouts, the scream of horses. Snow swirled, thick as smoke, hiding friend from foe. Tsalagi fought like the warrior he'd been, his knife flashing, blood staining the white ground. Alara moved beside him, fierce, her axe a blur, guarding Clara like a she-wolf. In the chaos, a memory hit Alara like a bullet. She froze, eyes wide. "The wagon train," she gasped. "Gunshots, mud, a child crying. I carried her out." "Clara." Tsalagi ducked a bullet, his gaze locking on hers. "You saved her?" Alara nodded, tears cutting tracks through the grime on her face. "Before they turned on me, left me for dead." A rider charged. Tsalagi's shot dropped him. Ward, bloodied, staggered forward, a crumpled letter falling from his coat. Alara snatched it, her hands shaking. "This is mine," she whispered, recognizing the seal. A message she'd carried, betrayed for. The storm swallowed Ward's retreat, his men dragging him back down the ridge. Tsalagi stood, chest heaving, snow clinging to his braid. Alara clutched the letter, her past bleeding into the present. Clara ran to her, unharmed, her small arms fierce. The blizzard roared, but the truth was louder. Alara wasn't just a stranger. She was a savior, and the fight wasn't over. The blizzard's wrath had carved its mark on the valley, but as dawn broke, a fragile calm settled over the Sangre de Cristo mountains. The letter Alara clutched, its seal broken, but truth intact, named the town's sheriff as her betrayer, a man who'd traded her life for his own gain. Tsalagi stood beside her, his breath still heavy from the fight, snow melting into his braid. Clara's arms wrapped tight around Alara, her small face fierce with loyalty. The storm had passed, but the weight of what they'd uncovered lingered like smoke over a dying fire. Spring of 1881 crept in slowly, the snow softening to slush, the pines shaking off their white burdens. Tsalagi burned the letter in the hearth, not out of fear, but to bury the past. The sheriff's treachery would be dealt with later. Justice in the frontier came on its own time, sharp as a blade when it landed. For now, the ranch demanded their hands. Fences to mend, horses to tend, a life to rebuild. Alara stayed, her presence no longer a question but a fact, like the mountains themselves. She worked beside Tsalagi, her axe traded for a hammer, her silence giving way to quiet words shared over coffee at dawn. Clara, ever her shadow, followed Alara to the old barn, now half rotten from years of neglect. "Can we fix it, Mama?" she asked, her voice bright as the new sun. Alara knelt, inspecting the beams. "Not fix," she said, a spark in her eyes. "Build something new." Tsalagi overheard, his hands pausing on the plow. He'd planned to tear the barn down, But Alara's gaze held a vision he hadn't seen before. A schoolhouse, rough but real, for Clara and the scattered children of trappers and ranchers across the valley. By April, the barn's skeleton stood transformed. Lagai hauled timber, his Comanche strength carving beams with patterns of hawks and stars. Alara nailed planks with steady hands, her scar a faint shadow under her sleeve. Clara carried nails in a tin bucket, chattering about letters and numbers she'd learn. The work was grueling, the days long, but laughter broke through the sweat. Clara's giggle, Ilara's low chuckle, even Salagi's rare grunt of amusement when Clara smeared mud on his cheek. One morning, as the valley bloomed with wildflowers, Salagi led Ilara to the creek. In his hand was a silver ring, forged years ago for his lost wife, etched with a hawk's silhouette soaring over a jagged ridge. "Made it for her," he said, voice rough as the earth underfoot. She never wore it. Said the land was enough. He paused, the ring catching the light. "You brought something back to this place, Ilara, to Clara, to me," her breath caught, eyes tracing the hawk's wings. "I'm still broken," she whispered, "pieces missing." Salagai stepped closer, his shadow steady. "Ain't about being whole, it's about staying." She took the ring, her fingers brushing his, and slipped it on. It fit, not perfect, but right, like a trail worn by years of travel. Clara, watching from the porch, clapped her hands, her braid bouncing. "Mama's staying," she shouted, running to them. Salagi lifted her, his eyes meeting Ilara's over the girl's head. No words passed, but the air held a promise stronger than any vow. By May, the schoolhouse stood proud, its roof slanted against the mountain winds. Inside, benches of reclaimed wood lined the walls, a blackboard salvaged from a trader's wagon at the front. Ilara taught, her voice clear as a creek, guiding Clara and 5 other children through letters and sums. They came early, boots muddy, bringing apples or stories of the trails. Ilara, once a courier dodging bullets, now traced words on slate, her scar a badge of survival, not shame. The children called her Miss Ilara, their voices a chorus that filled the valley with life. Salagi watched from the ridge, his horse grazing nearby. The sheriff's shadow still loomed. Justice would come, he'd see to it. But for now, he saw Clara's smile, wider than it had been since the robbery. He saw Ilara, no longer a stranger, her hand steady as she wrote on the board. The ranch, once a fortress of solitude, hummed with purpose. At night, by the fire, Clara slept with a pine-carved hawk beside her, Ilara's ring glinting as she tucked the girl in. Salagai sat on the porch, the stars sharp above, and for the first time in years, the silence felt like home. Ilara's journey from a stranger in a blizzard to a cornerstone of Salagi's ranch shows how trust and courage can rebuild a home from ashes. Clara's unwavering faith and the hawk-etched ring remind us that family is forged in choice, not just blood. What did this tale of survival and redemption stir in you? Share your thoughts. Where did this story take you, and what lingered in your heart? Your reflections mean the world to us. We're grateful for your time in this windswept valley. Join us again for more stories of the frontier, where hope rises against the odds, and we'll meet you under the next starry sky.